Okay, folks, I think we're going to get started. I'm going to call the Diversion Authority meeting to order. It is 3:31 on May 27th. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
I'm here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn. Mr. Ebbinger.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mrs. Shirlene.
I'm here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Seljavold. Here. The quorum is present.
Thank you. Number 2 is approval of minutes from the April 22nd, 2021 meeting. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Okay. And I can do voice call now. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, on to number 3, approval order of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the order of the agenda, please?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion passes. Okay, and then on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Steen moves. Second. Campbell.
Okay, any discussion about any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, could I get a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebbinger.
Aye.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Shirlene.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seljavold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you, and the consent agenda motion passes. On to number 4, Executive Director Report. I will turn it over to Executive Director Joel Paulson.
Madam Chair, do we have a new member you wanted to introduce us to?
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Yes, we do, and we probably should. The newest member of the Diversion Authority is Councilmember Larry Seljavold, and welcome to your very first board meeting. I'm sure you will know everything by the end of the meeting, all the 12 years there is to know about the diversion project.
I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Fast learner.
Well, Madam Chair, before I begin, I did have an opportunity to meet with Board Member Seljavold today. We spent about an hour and 15 minutes, and I think he's up to speed on everything. So,
Perfect. We will defer all questions to him then.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. It is great to see everyone's faces again, and I'm glad that we can meet in person now and hopefully continue this in the future. It just feels so much nicer to have everyone in the same room to have some discussions about the diversion project. So just want to, I'll move into the May happenings as part of my executive director report. On the communications front, we've been invited to speak at a number of national events. The American Society of Floodplain Managers National Conference, the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance Work Group. I did a presentation for both of those. So they're both very pertinent to our project. Some of the FEMA folks that had reached out are some of the same FEMA folks that we'll be working with for potential future federal funding through the BRIC program. And of course, it's always nice to touch in with our floodplain management society. Minnesota is very much a part of that, and so there were some nice comments from our presentation from the Minnesota floodplain managers that are working for the DNR. And then, of course, we've been meeting with the Corps of Engineers to talk about coordination with the different regulatory agencies as we kind of move into the potential implementation of the project. We'll definitely have a lot of work to do on that front as well. A few legislative updates. I was present in Bismarck for the signing of the bonding bill, and it was a great event. The governor did a nice speech. I hope most of you were able to catch that. Bottom line, I think his perspective was this was just smart financing, smart conservative financing, I think is what he put it. the ability for the state to grab dollars at a very low interest and be able to get infrastructure projects done that ultimately save the taxpayers money. It was just, a very nice words from him on that signing. A few P3 updates, continued coordination with the stakeholders for workforce development. I think most of you maybe have been getting questions from constituents and groups concerning what does this P3 mean to my industry, how many workers are coming, and the like. And so we have been coordinating with the Chamber of Commerce and the Home Builders Association, as well as other stakeholders in the Workforce Development Initiative. And obviously, as we move forward and if we get to the point of selecting the preferred developer, we'll certainly know more about what their workforce needs are, and we can start to have much more public discussions as far as that's concerned. And then, of course, we did complete the review of the financial proposals. And we are getting ready to engage the board in discussions about the selection of the preferred proposers very soon. Other ongoing coordination, Mr. Bakigard, our engineering director, has been putting in an awful lot of work along with the county engineer, Cass County engineer, to move forward utility, township, and municipal MOU agreements. We have been successful on a few townships, and we are very close on a number of other townships. Ideally, we'd like to get all these MOUs in place prior to the construction of the P3 portion of the project. And so we're making a lot of headway on many of those MOUs. And as you can see from our board agenda, there's a few of those on the agenda here this month. Multiple policies and plans have been started as part of the settlement agreement. So things like our cemetery mitigation, the project in Comstock, the project in Christine, Wolverton, and Georgetown. We've met with Buffalo Red Watershed District as well. They'll be the lead on those projects in Minnesota, and we hope to get those moving as quickly as possible. And then, of course, as usual, permit coordination, always a lot of work to be done there. Number of our HMG consultants and our internal staff have been working and meeting with the Corps and to ensure that we're meeting all permit conditions, and we're tracking those as well. So with that, I'll certainly entertain any questions from the board on our activities in May.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Do we have any questions? Any questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on to general counsel updates. Mr. Shockley.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Diversion Authority Board. I have a number of items related to financing of the project for your approval. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the Master Indenture of Trust. This is a document that really ties all of the financing for the entire diversion project together. This morning, the Cass County Joint Water Resource District approved the Master Indenture of Trust. Previously, the City of Fargo has accepted the responsibilities as fiscal agent, and the Bank of North Dakota has approved the Master Indenture of Trust as the trustee. I certainly can answer any questions. It's quite a lengthy document, but we're looking for approval from the Diversion Authority Board. Also, yesterday, the Finance Committee recommended approval of the Master Indenture of Trust. And just briefly, the Master Indenture of Trust authorizes the authority to issue the various debt obligations that are part of our finance plan. And it also contemplates the ability for the Diversion Authority over the next 40 to 50 years to issue other forms of debt financing if it needs to. One of the goals as I drafted this document was to make sure to give the Diversion Authority maximum flexibility over the years. That's why you'll see references in the document to sales tax bonds, Army Corps of Engineer, WIFI program, this category of additional revenue bonds. We're not contemplating issuing that debt at this time, but I wanted to make sure that we had the maximum flexibility because we really don't know what'll happen in 30 years or 20 years, a different board, and there may be a better financing opportunity at that time. So can certainly answer any questions, but we'd be looking for a motion to approve.
Any questions at this time about the master indenture of trust? Okay. If not, could Commissioner Steen?
Madam Chair, thank you. I move to approve the master indenture of trust.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Emminger,
Yes.
Mr. Strand,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold.
Yes.
That is everyone.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Number,
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item I have is a resolution consenting to Cass County Joint Water Resource District's issuance of temporary refunding improvement bonds. These bonds are being issued to redeem or prepay the Wells Fargo credit facilities that are being held by the city of Fargo and Cass County currently. Previously, the city of Fargo and Cass County had issued loans to pay for initial preliminary project activities. Pursuant to our plan of finance, we'd always intended that these two loans would be paid off with temporary refunding improvement bonds. The payoff of these two loans is also required in order to issue the WIFI debt. The Wells Fargo credit facility has the first lien on the sales taxes of Cass County and Fargo, and as a result, we need to remove that lien. And this morning, Cass County Joint had approved the issuance of those bonds. Pursuant to the Joint Powers Agreement, the Diversion Authority needs to consent when a member entity issues debt for the project. And so this motion is just consenting to that issuance. Happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the matter.
Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, question. John, I was going to ask this morning, it just slipped my mind, but how are these bonds backed? By the assessment district, or how is that?
Yeah, so great question. So the interest on the bonds, so the temporary bonds, the interest on them is payable through what is regarded as required temporary debt service revenue, which is paid out of revenues from the authority. So the sales taxes and other revenues that flow into the trustee pay the interest. The principal on the bonds is payable from bonds that will either be refunded in the future, or as we get cash on hand from the diversion authority from the state, we can pay down those bonds, or we can issue additional temporary debt. Ultimately, they are backed by the assessment district and ultimately by Cass County. But the intent of the finance plan is to use net pledged revenues to pay everything. So, and is this consistent with the overall objective of the finance plan to only use the assessment district as a backstop?
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Emminger,
Yes.
Mr. Strand,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to present the next resolution, and that's approving the WIFI loan agreement. The WIFI loan agreement, as the board will recall, about 18 months ago, we were approved to apply for a WIFI loan. We applied for the WIFI loan, which is really the pre-approval process. We went through the approval process. The WIFI loan agreement is the final step in the process before closing. And so this resolution approves the WIFI loan. We are tentatively set to close on the WIFI loan on June 18th. The total amount of the WIFI loan is $569 million. The advantages of the WIFI loan are that during construction, it is a drawdown loan, which means that you do not pay any interest during the construction period. So no payment is due during construction, and we're tentatively envisioning that construction would be complete either in 2027 or 2028. So there are no debt service payments due. Following construction, we can defer the payments for up to 5 years. We're currently working through some final sizing. We may be able to make some, pay down a little bit of interest and debt during the 5-year deferral, but that's at the option of the authority. If the sales taxes are performing well, we can make those options. And then after the 5-year deferral period, you have 35 years of repayment. The interest rate is based upon 1 basis point, which is 0.01% above the U.S. Treasury rates. So the private sector cannot compete with this sort of financing. So I can answer any questions, but we're at the finish line, so to speak, for the WIFI loan.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions or discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seldebold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item I have on the agenda is the fiscal agent fee approval. And so we thought it would be appropriate to get a little background about what the fiscal agent fee is and what it is for. So under the Master Indenture of Trust, there's a split in duties. We have a trustee, which is the Bank of North Dakota. The trustee is responsible for taking in the collections of net pledged revenues and paying the debt service, redeeming bonds, other functions that you would normally have a trustee perform. Normally, a trustee would charge you every time you redeemed a bond or did a wire transfer or other activities that are normally required in a trust. And usually those are smaller charges of a couple $100, given that we have so many different obligations here and so many different responsibilities for the trustee. In addition to a normal trustee fee, we felt in talking with the trustee that they would have just a flat fee. Just to give a little bit of perspective, I have another large transaction in which it just has 2 series of bonds. In that series of bonds, they're very simple, and the trustee is a private entity. They're charging $2,500 per month. Given the complexity of this transaction, Bank of North Dakota just proposed a flat fee that was inclusive of all of these smaller charges so that we sort of weren't getting nickeled and dimed. It was just a flat fee. In discussions with the fiscal agent, that's the city of Fargo, the fiscal agent has fiduciary duties under the Master Indenture of Trust that include responsibility to segregate funds. The Master Indenture of Trust sets forth very specific funds and how those funds are spent and tracking of those funds for both IRS compliance, EPA WIFI compliance, and then also for state SRF loan compliance. And so you are going to start seeing a change in how financials are presented to the board. It's more of it's more disciplined approach than what you're probably used to seeing. And so over the next couple of months, you'll start seeing changes in how financials are presented to the board because tracking of money becomes more important in the color of money aspect. So does the money come from this loan proceed? Does it come from the state dollars? Each fund is associated with a different expense. And there are duties that the fiscal agent has that are both from a liability standpoint for managing funds, in addition to these compliance issues. And so in talking with the city of Fargo, we felt that it was appropriate during construction to match the trustee fees. After construction, the fiscal agent fees would likely go down because there'll be less responsibility after construction. So just as we think about it, during construction, the fiscal agent might have 2 FTEs, and then after construction, it might be 4 or 5 hours a month that would be responsible for the fiscal agent. And so we put a reopener in the agreement that we would match the trustees' fees during construction. After construction, we would renegotiate what that trustees' fee would look like. I did advise yesterday that the City of Fargo members should probably abstain from voting on it, since that, just the appearance of Fargo voting a fee for themselves. I'm comfortable in recommending the amount of the fee. It is appropriate. It's less than what we would pay a private party to manage it. And there's logic behind the fee if you equate it to a full-time equivalent position and how much it costs for that equivalent position. Can certainly answer any questions that you might have about it.
Commissioner Olson.
John, this is nothing against Fargo. Is it not prudent to have someone that isn't connected with the diversion be the fiscal agent? Is there a reason for that or not?
Well,
Or is it to save money?
Partially, there's the trustee, from the standpoint of having a third party, is more important to have that independence than the fiscal agent. The fiscal agent is responsible for fund management, and there's a lot of eyes on this transaction, whether it's USEP, WIFI, whether it's private bondholders, whether it's private developers. During the negotiations and work-throughs of the Master Indenture of Trust, I had dealings with 7 different bond counsel, each representing different groups. The issue of the fiscal agent being the City of Fargo never came up, because you just don't have the same level of concern that you do with the trustee. The concern about having a third party is when you're paying debt service. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what people are concerned about. If you're a bondholder or you hold the WIFI loan, their concern is there going to be somebody who pays the bill? On the fiscal agent side, it's more of a regulatory compliance issue. And Fargo is, from my standpoint, Fargo is a sophisticated entity. They deal with SRF on a regular basis. They deal with all these different programs, and they have a large budget. So from my standpoint, I don't have a concern with Fargo being the fiscal agent, and it actually was never an issue when we negotiated out the Master Indenture Trust.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Strand.
John, help me rehear what I think you said. Did you indicate that Fargo sitting members should not vote on this?
Commissioner Strand, I would recommend that you would just abstain from the voting, just for appearances, and also be voting to have a fee assigned to Fargo.
And I'll continue my question, and I'm not a legal expert, but it's my sense, and I'm not sure if we're operating under North Dakota law or Minnesota law, but it's my sense that if you're sitting board members in North Dakota, you're obligated to vote unless you have a viable conflict of interest the other board members accept. And usually, if you have a conflict of interest, it's your personal financial involvement. So my sense is statute requires us to vote.
So first of all, great question. We are operating under North Dakota law. Anything dealing with the diversion authority is under North Dakota law. You are correct in the regards of if you have a financial interest, you need to recuse yourself. Here, I think it's questionable whether or not you have a financial interest. And yesterday, we just thought it was more appropriate to abstain. You can if you feel strongly that you want to vote, you can certainly participate. But we just felt that it was more appropriate for you to abstain from the vote as Fargo members, because it was a fiscal fee, and because Fargo was, it's an agreement. And actually, there is an AG opinion that would say it's not a direct conflict, because there was a similar AG opinion dealing with the city of Harwood and a nonprofit entity, and they came to the AG came to the opinion that it was not a conflict. So you're correct, but just given the appearance, my recommendation was that you may want to consider abstaining.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Strand, I'm sorry, this is Mahoney. John, yesterday I suggested at the finance meeting that we abstain. I apologize. You are right. We could vote on this, but it was just a question of appearance, and the rest of the board members would understand this as well. But if you feel we want to vote on it, John, we wouldn't hold that back. So,
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
It's not whether I want to, I believe we're obligated to by statute. I don't think a person can declare abstain unless there's a statutorily viable reason to. I don't think that, you know, that's my sense of North Dakota law, is that even if you'd like to abstain, and if you have a conflict, you declare it. It's your peers that decide if that's an issue. But it's not whether it appears to be a conflict. It's my sense that you're required to vote on jurisdictions, on boards, when there's financial decisions. That's my question.
So, and I'll get into a little nuance of law here. So you're correct. If you have a true conflict of interest and you declare it, your position is not counted as you count the majority of the votes. So, for example, you have a 13-member board, one member has a conflict, you reduce the number of voting members to 12. In a case in which a member doesn't have a true conflict of interest, because once in a while you will run into somebody saying they have a conflict and they really don't have a conflict, because I as an attorney can't force somebody to vote. I mean, if somebody says I'm not voting, I'm going to abstain because I'm not comfortable with it, even though they don't have a true technical conflict, their vote is counted as going towards the majority. And so in this case, I'm not suggesting that you would have the normal process in which somebody would declare a vote or declare a conflict of interest and you wouldn't count them. Just if you're not comfortable voting on it as a member of Fargo, you could certainly abstain. You would still be counted towards the majority vote. So.
Any other additional questions? Commissioner Steen.
I'd like to move to approve the fiscal agent agreement with the fee as presented.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Commissioner Sherling has seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, could I get a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
abstain.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seldgevold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
The fee approval has passed. Mr. Shockley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the final item I have for the agenda is the resolution granting a variance for Cass County to own for FEMA-owned properties. There, if you scroll down, I think it's on the third page, a brief map, second page. There are a number of parcels that are located next to the Red River control structure that were FEMA flood buyouts that are currently with Cass County. Under the joint powers agreement, all property that's outside the city is supposed to be owned by the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. That was how we allocated property ownership under the JPA. However, these parcels, because they were bought with FEMA funds, through the great work of Nathan, City of Fargo engineer, and a number of other people, were able to get variance so that you could actually construct structures on these FEMA parcels, but transferring the actual underlying title from Cass County to the Cass County Joint Water Resource District is a pretty high hill to climb. And therefore, we're suggesting, and the JPA contemplates, that you would have you would approve a variance in ownership. And so because of the previous ownership of Cass County buying them through FEMA, we're suggesting that the board would approve a variance for a housekeeping issue. You may ask, why do we even need to worry about this? Long-term, we have accounting requirements, whether it's through Army Corps of Engineers for land ownership, whether it's through EPA, whether it's through the state agencies. And as a housekeeping matter, we wanted to make sure the property ownership matched up to what's in the JPA. So if anybody questioned, well, why are you varying from what's in the JPA? that we had the board on the record approving of the variance. And so in this case, the variance makes a lot of sense because it just, trying to get it transferred from Cass County to Cass County joint, it seems like a pretty tall order. And I mean, it's really a distinction without a difference, in my opinion.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger,
Yes.
Mr. Strand,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Right, the motion passes.
Thank you, everybody, and sorry for the very lengthy packet, but we had a lot of financing to take care of, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Moving on to number 6, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer Project Update. Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to be here. This is the monthly update for the Corps for the month of May. We now have 4 projects under construction, so that's pretty exciting to talk about. At the Diversion Inlet, we're approaching 50% complete, and they've completed the left and right dam walls. Do you remember where the preloads were? Well, those are taken off, and the walls have been placed where those preloads were located. They're also making some big pours in the Stilling Basin area. On the wild rice, same, the approach walls are done. They're gonna start forming and placing the retaining walls on those upstream side. And then we had our largest pour to date a couple weeks ago at 1,900 cubic yards in the Stilling Basin at the wild rice, and that slab was about 8 feet thick, over 190 trucks, so pretty cool. I-29, we had an open house last night for the public down at Hickson Community Center. They've started stripping, IBI has started stripping where that bypass is gonna go in place. And then over the course of this construction season, there will be about 1 million yards of earthwork being moved around for that project. So very big year for that as well. Now into design, well, SE1 construction, that started out there as well. They've done some stripping, clearing and grubbing, digging the inspection trench, and that should be done no later than June in a couple years. The Red River Structure Design still on schedule to have the final design done in August so we can start contracting for that, that big structure. Reach SC1B, that's in design. The 35% review is coming up in June. And 2A and 2B still being under design, 95% for 2A coming up, and then 35% for 2B coming up as well. Drain 27, approaching the end of the design on that one. We should have final plans and specs 30 July, and then we'll start contracting for that. Probably put that out for bids late calendar year, maybe November, December. And then the final item, Drayton Dam, we're approaching final design on that mitigation project as well. The final review on that one starts 20 June. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Williams? All right, thank you very much. It's quite a lot of concrete. All right, moving on to number 7, public outreach update. And I will turn that over to Commissioner Olson.
Yes, and I'd like to turn it over to Jennifer. We did not have a meeting this month, but that doesn't mean that the outreach has not been very busy, and Jennifer will give us an update.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good to see everyone in person for this meeting, so glad to be here. So I started with the homepage that we currently have for the website. Just wanted you to be able to see what is there now and talk through a little bit why we're making the changes. So what you see now is basically a news feed on what's happening with the diversion. But now that we are moving into that construction phase and we have a lot of attention coming our way with the upcoming award, we are making changes to the homepage. So I'm going to move to this new landing page that we have designed as the new homepage for the website. So just to give you some insight, the existing page will still be there as is. This is just another page sort of in front of that site, and it gives you a little bit more perspective on the project, where we're located. You can see the visual that gives you some insight into the construction area. We're going to continually update this video at the top so you can see the progress of the project as it continues to develop. You'll notice that the links at the top are the same links that are on the current site, so you'll still be able to get to the same information that you are used to going to before. We've added a portion at the very top for breaking news. So if we have any major construction updates or traffic posts that we need to share, or any just urgent details about the project in general, we can put that at the top at any time. And then I'm going to scroll down through this so you can see a little bit of what we've added for content on the homepage. Just a little explanation about what is the project. You don't get that perspective when you go to the existing homepage, so it helps people who are just now learning about the project to have a little bit more information. There's a video placeholder here as well. We're also working on a video that gives that same bit of information in a more personal face-to-face interview style with some of the key individuals who have been working on the project. And then we have some statistics here, so I'll just move forward so you can see when you scroll through here, they will change. We'll continue to update that with different statistics as we move through the build of the project, but it's just some interesting facts that you'll be able to see on a regular basis. And then the map area. So what you see now is not completely what will be there by next week. If we have your blessing with this site, and we'll share the link with you so you can take a look at it more, this section will continue to change. We're working with the team at AE2S now, where they're building it to be a lot more visual with some of the buildings and the locations for the sites, where you can click on them and find out a little bit more about what's happening at each of the areas where the builds are happening. So you can see maybe what percentage they are with the completion, or a little bit about the area or what they're working on at the time. And then we have some pictures that not only share a little bit about what we've been doing as far as events and the build, but also some of the historic photos as well that show a little bit more of the purpose of why we're building the project. So that's just a little bit of what we have for now on the homepage. It's not something that will continue to be there forever, the same as it is now. It's something that we want to keep as like a living page that continues to evolve with the project. So it just gives you a good placeholder now that for anyone new coming to the site, they're able to see exactly who we are, where we are, what the project is about, and get a stronger sense of what's going on here. So I wanted to share that with you today, so you open it up for feedback if you have any questions, or we'll also share the link later so you can take a look at that as well. Any thoughts?
Questions or comments for Jennifer? All right. Oh, Commissioner Olson.
Quickly, Jennifer, there was a comment made this morning that we need to make it a little bit more user-friendly for some hot buttons. You know, somebody goes and wants to go directly to information on floor easements, different things. Certainly those are things that we need to explore.
So we can do that. So the beauty of this is that not only is it a pretty simplistic design how it is now, but we can certainly add those features as needed when there's something important happening where we need to add something for a short period of time for a hot button, or if there's ongoing content that you think would be valuable on the homepage, we certainly can add that as well. Is that anything that you think would stop the existing launch that we'd like to do of this homepage? Is it something that we could add in the coming weeks?
To me, certainly it'd be something we could add.
Okay.
Yeah.
What our goal is, we'd like to be able to launch this by the end of next week. And by launching, really, we're just turning it on because it exists now in the sandbox here. We're just going to be moving it over where it's the same existing site. You'll just see the new homepage. But our goal would be to target by the end of next week, if that gives enough time for review here.
And I would say too, Commissioner Olson, earlier this afternoon, the MCC JPA met, and actually AE2S showed us that on the website. So I believe Jennifer is just talking about the homepage, but if you click About and then scroll down, there is more information about flowage easements, and it has a lot more updated information and is more user-friendly than it has been previously in the past. So I know that that is something that is being worked on, but I think you're just wondering about just the homepage.
Just the homepage.
Separate.
So you will see basic similarities on the other pages as you have before. We have adjusted the headers so it matches this homepage, so there's more consistency between the new look. But yes, for now, it would be just this homepage.
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. So are you gonna have a button for like a map?
Turn your button on.
Just press.
There we go. Are you gonna have a button for a map search? That's the call I get most frequently. Somebody wants to know how a particular parcel is going to be impacted before and after the project is completed.
So if it's not on the land section now, is that on the land section at the moment?
It is.
It is.
It is, and then I think if you go to project dashboard, does that pull up too? Yep.
Yeah,
there's
so.
two locations.
Okay, I get feedback, but people can't find it, so.
So that's good feedback. We can do something where we add that maybe to this map section here. So this is just going to show like an overall view of all the construction areas, but we can certainly put a link here that takes you to that additional map that you're talking about that would help give them some guidance to find what they are
Yeah,
looking
people
for.
want to be able to just type in an address and get an answer on a particular parcel,
Yeah,
especially if they're considering purchasing.
absolutely. So we'll do that. We can add something right here that'll take them straight to that section, and then it'll be easy to find from the homepage.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions for Jennifer? All right, thank you. And I'm sure that if you have further comments or questions like Commissioner Shirley had from constituents, just forward them to Jennifer and Joel, and we can take a look at them.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 8, land management updates. Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. Land management met yesterday, and we had a busy agenda. We continue to acquire property. We have in the Drain 27 wetland restoration project, the Red River control structure, environmental monitoring easements, southern embankment reach 2A, and upstream structures. We've acquired property interests in over 650 parcels and completed acquisitions for the diversion channel, the southern embankment reach 1, the I-29 roadways, the Wild Rice River control structure, and the diversion inlet structure. Appraisal work is being completed for the upstream structures. That includes farmsteads and rural residential structures. And we continue to work on the flowage easement valuation study. Phase 2 includes over 500 parcels with tillable land in the upstream mitigation area, and have developed a special web page and educational video to explain the process to the property owners. And I assume that will be on a button somewhere too for those property owners that are interested in looking at that. We continue to work on the mitigation program development and refinement. And as you can see in your packet, the beautiful colored maps are there for you to take a deeper dive if you'd like. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherling. Any questions or comments? All right, moving on to finance. And I know that Mayor Daughters was not able to be at the finance meeting yesterday, and Commissioner Steen led it. So turning it over to you, Commissioner Steen.
Thank you. Before Joel, come up, Joel, before Joel talks about the contract actions that we need to approve at the board level, everything else we did at the finance committee yesterday was pretty much covered in the consent agenda and Mr. Shocklee's presentation. And so this is it, Joel, so go ahead and talk about the contract action.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Steen. We have one contracting action for the board's consideration this month. It's Task Order 32, Amendment 0 for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers construction services done by HMG. So this is for the project to have HMG personnel in the field to assist the Corps with the construction of the I-29 grade raise. The reason for this, and Terry can certainly take any questions, but my understanding is the Corps of Engineers really has their employees focused on flood control projects. The I-29 grade raise project has a very significant transportation element to it. So the ability to have HMG staff that are accustomed with North Dakota DOT standards in construction inspection is extremely valuable and necessary for the administration of this contract. And so those folks will be in the field with the Corps folks, assisting primarily with the transportation elements of construction on that project. So this is the task order to fund a budget for HMG to have those personnel in the field. And I'll take any questions.
Mayor Mahoney.
Joel, is this paid then out of core money or is this paid out of overall money?
This is paid out of DA funds.
But in some sense, it's a core bid project, 65 million. Why wouldn't it come out of their budget?
And Terry, if I mess this up, please help me. But so if the Corps requests assistance with their federal work, we have the ability to do that and fund that assistance through our own dollars. If we said, no, we will not provide assistance, the Corps will have to go out on an IDIQ contract. They have consultants that they vetted, that they utilize for projects as needed. So in this case, the Corps, if we wanted the Corps to fund these dollars, they would go through an internal process and bring a new consultant on board that would perform these services on behalf of the Corps. Given that the HMG has been involved in the drainage design and their knowledge and background of the project, our staff and the Corps staff feel that the value that HMG brings to the table with their background and knowledge, as well as their knowledge of the DOT, it's worth us pursuing this with non-federal dollars in order to assist the federal contract to be implemented.
So is there a payback sometime? Because I don't mind the reasons you're giving this, but it's clearly coming out of a tight budget on our side. And the Corps has been ahead of budget on a lot of their side. Wouldn't they have the ability, or is Terry going to give us a little help somewhere else later?
I'll defer that question to Ms. Williams, but I'll attempt to answer it to the best of my ability. We have been in some level of discussions with the Corps. There have been many other instances over the duration of the development of this project where we have assisted the Corps. All of the modeling work that's been done to date, would fall under the federal program, but we've been supporting that with HMG, given their detail and background with drainage and the local basins here and the work that they've done for decades with the watershed districts. We're uniquely positioned to do the modeling work. So in some respects, this is similar to that in the fact that HMG has done a number of DOT contracts. They understand the specifications, what the DOT is looking for. They have the working relationships with the DOT. And to bring in another consultant to do that would obviously add some level of disruption as well. some knowledge that folks would need to get up to speed on, and some inefficiencies on that respect. But as far as coordinating additional federal dollars to cover the work that we've contributed, it is a topic of discussion with the Corps at the moment. So.
Well, it's just that we have a contingency, as I understand it, so I'm assuming what you're telling me, this is coming out of contingency fee. I also understand in the future, at the end of the project, if the Corps has some excess funds, theoretically, it's supposed to come back to us as a payback. No guarantee, but that might happen, so. Just trying to understand where the money's coming from. Thank you.
Yes, you're correct, Mayor. In the project partnership agreement, if the Corps does come in under budget, it does indicate within that agreement to pay back to the local non-federal sponsor for that amount of under budget. So as we continue to work with the Corps on their side and monitor the budgets and the schedules and how things are coming in, it's certainly something that we're tracking and considering in our overall financial plan.
Mayor Dartis.
I would encourage the board to be very cautious on burning up any more of our contingencies that we have. For where we're at in the entire process and for the knowns and the unknowns, I'm very concerned about that. The other thing is so am I to understand that this entire expense is being transferred to the DA from the Corps of Engineers? And I have great respect for the Houston Moore Group, okay? But this is not about them. So this entire expense of $487,899 is now our expense. That's just the basic simples of it.
So, Mayor Dartis, that is correct. And I'll just put a few finer points on, and I think it's somewhat related to what Mayor Mahoney had mentioned as far as the potential payback if the Corps comes in under budget. So if we're managing a scope of work, let's just say, it's, $500,000 scope of work for construction inspection. If the Corps has to go through their administrative procedures, bring in a new consultant, and you have some inefficiencies there where the cost ends up being $600,000 or $700,000, whether we're using federal funds or our own local funds, it is, we want to do it the most cost effective to the overall taxpayer. Certainly understanding the perspective that we want to use and maximize our federal funds and through the PPA. I believe as we go through the rest of the construction process that we will utilize the full $750 million of Corps funding to complete the Corps' obligations. As well as continued discussions with the Corps of things that could potentially fit within the federal program that are currently not in the federal program. So I think from our perspective is we want to figure out how to do all the work as cheap as possible, ultimately understanding that by the end of the project, we'll have expended the full amount of federal funding anyway, on items that are eligible for federal construction. So I hope that makes sense.
Again, I would encourage the board that we not draw down our contingencies any further until we know where we are at on our P3, and that's what this is doing. So I would encourage the board to vote against this.
Mayor Dartis, if I may, and perhaps Martin can assist. I do not believe this would be coming out of contingencies as this was budgeted in our cash budget. And this allocation would be already allocated under engineering services within our current budget. So this would not be coming out of our overall program contingencies. And is that correct, Martin?
Mayor Dartis, did you have any further questions or follow-up questions? Okay, Commissioner Steen.
Just two thoughts. So, Joel, at what point, if we're picking up these additional costs, do we determine that it's actually going to be coming out of our contingency? Or did we contemplate this with this year's budget and the overall project budget? That's what I'm getting at. I think that's what Mayor Dartis is also asking.
And maybe I'll bring Mr. Nicholson back up here to, to answer that question, because I think it's a great question, Commissioner Steen.
Yes, Commissioner Steen and Commissioner Steen and members of the board, these expenditures and the assistance by the local consultants to assist the Corps have been budgeted as part of the DA budget and planned for in each annual year cash budget. So it isn't as much a contingency question as it is an allocation of resources that utilizes the local consulting community that's already been helping the Corps with respect to the design.
Yeah,
That
thank you.
being said, at what dollar amount? What dollar amount do we have as far as the engineering services that's in the budget? So you're telling us that this will be within the budget?
It is within the budget that has been anticipated for the 2021 cash budget and within the program budget that we're dealing with on a cost basis. There's a separate contingency budget that this is not allocated to.
Thank you, Mr. Martinson. So of the $489,000, what does that for additional engineering costs that we may incur in 2021? What is the balance of that account with this type of an expenditure?
I don't have those numbers on the top of my head. I don't know whether Paul has them on the top of his. He can dig out, I guess, a computer and find it.
Obviously, my point that I'm trying to make here is that when you're spending $500,000 at a time, I'd be concerned about where we're going to end up by October or September, November of 2021. I'm just trying to be as cautious as we possibly can until we know the given of where we are at in the P3 bid process. Thank you.
Just one other point about this year's budget. On the screen, you can see that this is a multi-year contract. So this runs through 2024. And so the annual amounts are shown there on the screen. So in 2021, it's anticipated around $155,000 of budget allocation. And the subsequent years are shown.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. Just a basic question, maybe I missed it, but is this a public bid process that we got to this point from, or a sole source, or how did we get there?
So the initial HMG contracts were all competitively solicited. And so HMG was hired by the Diversion Authority many years ago to assist with all aspects of engineering. So as we move forward with any engineering needs, we continue to use HMG to provide those resources.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I can cut to the chase on this from my perspective. We budgeted $506,919 to do this exercise. The estimate came in at roughly $487,000, and I am going to look at my friends at the Army Corps and say that if we deviate from this and say this is going to be a solely Army Corps project, with due respect, I don't think you're going to come in at 100,000 more. It's going to be more than 100,000 more. So our friends at the Army Corps will come back in some which way or form in lieu of us asking them to do this at a cost of $700,000. We'll do it at a cost of $500,000, which is still within our budget and actually below by $17,000. And look to them as good players and good partners for them to reimburse us in some other way. Long story short, if we don't do this, they'll do it. It's going to cost us more, and we'll wind up with less money in the end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. Is it on? There we go. Okay, it just is automatic, I guess. I'm just wondering, is there any advantage to delaying the vote? I know we have a lot of decisions in between now and the next meeting, perhaps. Is there a disadvantage?
Commissioner Sherling, with construction starting out on the I-29 project, I believe the HMG folks will be engaged very soon. So maybe from a recommendation standpoint from your executive director, one thing we could do, because this is a multi-year contract, We can certainly monitor and get them started. I don't think we've ever had this discussion with the Corps, but say halfway through the project, we wanted to switch construction administration personnel, use their IDIQ consultants under Corps funding for whatever reason. I believe we could do that. It wouldn't be preferable, I don't think, but yeah. Yes, please. This contract has just as much to do with the Corps, and so I do think it's appropriate that Ms. Williams address the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to Commissioner Peterson's point about it costing more, so Houston Moore Group is the designer of record on I-29. They did the design, and when you bring somebody on for construction services, it should be the designer of record. And so that's why it's so important to have HMG on. If we did go out to somebody else to provide these services and they're not the designer of record, it would cost a lot of money for somebody else to take on that liability when they're not designer of record.
Madam Chair?
And then my question regarding the delay, a delay in a vote, would that make a difference?
I think a delay, we're counting on HMG to be available to review submittals from IBI as the designer of record. And that's will start up very soon, if not already.
Okay. Mayor Mahoney and then Commissioner Steen.
Would move to approve a one-year budget of $155,000 and to have this re-reviewed at our next meeting.
I would second.
Further discussion. Commissioner Steen.
As further discussion, I will support that. I think it's the right move to move ahead with HMG at this point. But I do think this is not the first time, Joel, that this discussion has come up with regard to the Corps engaging HMG to do something we thought was under the Corps' contract. And I get it. It's a different type of a process. If the Corps were to engage somebody else not already engaged, bring it into consultant, more cost, more time, et cetera. I get that. But it seems to me it'd be most efficient for everybody if they're comfortable using HMG, that they go ahead and reimburse the Diversion Authority for paying for this work that we're engaging on behalf of the Corps to do. And that's a discussion. I know you and I have talked about this. It's come up here before, but I think that needs to really undertake that discussion with the Corps to find out how much farther is this going to go, how many more occasions is this going to occur, what does this impact the diversions budget, what does this impact the Corps' budget. And I just think I get it, it's all one big pool, but in the end, we're the ones having to come up with the sales tax, the revenues, to make the payments on the financial plan when this project's done. So where does that all come down? And during construction of the project. So I really believe that, I'll support the motion, but we need to have a good discussion with the Corps. How much longer is this going to happen, go on, and what's the basis for it? So that's my thoughts.
Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you. Over the history of this project, the Corps, through their ability to obtain funds, compared to our timeline, fell short of some of the things we wanted to accomplish. And so there were some of the, during that time frame, the DA did agree to fund some of those shortfalls that the Corps had within their budgeting process. I couldn't agree more with what Merit Artis is saying here, that we need to be careful of where we're shifting from Corps federal dollars designated for this project to something that we did not budget and anticipate being our share. So I'm thankful for the caution that we have here. I think Mayor Mahoney's motion today is the correct one. I don't think we need to do the full 480,000 or whatever that number is today. I think we need to kind of educate ourselves a little bit on this budget, this whole budgeting process for this. I'm a little nervous going up too far out in in shifting something that's federal responsibility to local. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to provide some additional context in this discussion. So I have had many discussions with Terry and the Corps concerning this. So this is by no means a surprise that we're having this discussion with the board. And I do think you have some great policy perspectives on it today. I think I just would like to express that we will find a use for every federal dollar that we've agreed to in the PPA to date. And we have already assumed the risk of overage of that agreement. And so if we go over the $750 million on the federal side, the DA is responsible for all of that overage. So in some respects, we're just looking at a snapshot in time right now, certainly understanding the perspective to play cautious. And I have been advising the consultants to submit annual budgets instead of some of these longer term ones. I think in this respect, this is the total program or total project construction administrative task order. So I think that's somewhat appropriate, but I certainly agree on that annual approach in assessing where we're at the end of the year and negotiating the next year's task orders, given what develops over the course of that year. So just wanted to provide that additional maybe context to this discussion, because it is somewhat complicated. And to Commissioner Steen's, question about, having the Corps, reimburse us for costs or this, that, and the other thing. I think there's some legal things that the Corps just can't do on some of that. And so I think really it gets down to who's going to provide the most value on any particular project. I think the Corps and our team feels that HMG is the consultant to have that will do it the cheapest, whether it's federal dollars or local non-federal dollars. And knowing that we're going to leverage all the federal dollars by the end of this program anyhow. So definitely a lot to consider here, I know. And it is complex task order. So.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Joel. Good explanation. I think that even goes further to support Commissioner Campbell's motion, not a motion, but comment that we need to be further educated on how these budgets work together, because it's convoluted and confusing to many of us. There's a big pot of money. It's all going to be spent the best way we can. Okay, great. We need to know where that is. And I think the conversation and education would be excellent.
I agree. And Commissioner Steen, just to note, I mean, the board's been doing this since the start of the project. I mean, all the modeling, everything, falls within the same category. And so, to have this discussion and figure out where we're moving forward and how we want to manage the federal dollars, more intricately, I think is very much welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I'm guessing there might be times this goes the other way, where they might be incurring costs that they didn't anticipate that would have been otherwise in people's minds ours. Or no, ever?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure Ms. Williams could come up with all kinds of circumstances where, there's been cost increases on the federal side, in regards to things that maybe the DA had to do or were required to do in order to get, the Plan B permit. I don't know how much that added to federal costs, but those were all required for us to continue to move forward. I mean, it really is a partnership between us and the Corps, and we have a very good partnership and share that information and track each other's budgets and ensure that we're putting the right folks out in the field that need to be in the field and the right folks are designing that should be designing things. So,
Mayor Mahoney.
In light of the day, we're going to have a call to question, please.
Yep. I would concur with Commissioner Steen and Commissioner Campbell that I think a kind of a re-education or especially since we have full board now, with Councilmember Seljevold being appointed. It might be real timely to get everybody up to date. So I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Dardis.
No.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwing.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you. The motion passes. Do you have any other business? Commissioner Campbell?
I want to make one final comment. You know, the alternative on some of these things, if we were to say no, that it's a federal responsibility, and we had to wait for them to fill it within their, when they can. Has anybody noticed right now how if you have to sit and wait on something right now, the cost of waiting is? I mean, we right now, you can't get a contract for a steel building that goes out probably beyond a week. So there's an awful lot of things that come into play here where sometimes we have to do an advancement on things because the alternative of waiting for the funds to show up another source would be more costly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. Commissioner Steen?
One last comment. I'm just amazed how quickly we got through 830 some odd pages of agenda material today, so that's my comment.
Yes, and also appreciate the fact that it is electronic and not printed out, so we saved a small forest. So we are also very much into the resiliency part of this project. The next meeting is going to be June 24th, 2021, but we do need to go into executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code, Section 44-04-19.2?
So moved.
Second.
I don't believe I need to do a roll call for
Just
that.
do a verbal.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are in executive session. Motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting has been adjourned.